It was about this time that another group of people fought their way into the land of the Canaanites. They were called Philistines, and they came out of Egypt, settling along the fertile coastal plains. They fought many battles with both the Canaanites and the Hebrews, but the Hebrew advance into Canaan continued, and by 1000 BC, King David had taken Jerusalem and made it his capital. The kingdom of Israel was set up and flourished for several generations. But quarrels broke out amongst the tribes, and the kingdom split into two parts, Israel and Judah. It was in this weakened state that the area fell victim to wave after wave of invaders.
About 900 BC, the whole area was conquered by the Assyrians. The 10 tribes of Israel were taken off into slavery. The 2 tribes of Judah remained. 100 years later, the area was conquered by the Babylonians, who took the remaining 2 tribes of Judah off to Babylon as slaves. Then, when the Persians conquered the Babylonians, the Jews were set free to return to Judah. Here, they decided to keep themselves apart from the other tribes by forbidding marriage to people from the other tribes. Alexander the Great from Greece was next to conquer the area. Then came the Syrians and Egyptians together. Judea revolted and became independent for 140 years. In the year 63 BC, Judea became part of the Roman Empire and was renamed Palestine.
Later, the Judeans revolted. To punish them, the Romans destroyed Jerusalem, took their valuables, and enslaved some. A band of Jews fortified themselves on a mountain called Masada, but they eventually committed suicide.
During the Roman occupation, Christ was born. Although the Judeans did not accept Christianity, it did spread throughout the Roman Empire. When the Roman Empire collapsed around 700 AD, the Islamic religion spread throughout the Middle East. Christians, Jews, and the followers of Islam, the Muslims, all regarded Jerusalem as sacred. The Pope in Rome was worried that Jerusalem was in non-Christian hands and encouraged European princes to conquer and settle the Holy Land. A series of bloody Christian crusades eventually conquered the Holy Land. They were in turn conquered by the Egyptians under Saladin. Next came the Ottoman Turks, who held the area until the First World War in 1914.
The Ottoman Turks were Muslims, and so Christians in the area suffered. But by the beginning of World War I, the Ottoman Empire was weak and in decay.
Well, perhaps you can see now what people mean when they say that history repeats itself. Next week, we'll show you the Israel-Palestine history from 1900 onwards. And on a lighter note, we'll celebrate the ABC's 50th birthday by taking you on a visit to a radio studio, and we'll show you how to do some television magic. Till next week, from all of us to all of you, bye-bye.
Some women need to work, some women want to work, some women just have to work. All of them suffer the same heart-rending problem. Who'll care for the children?
It's all right. Cuddle with Mum. Quick cuddle. Mummy, off to work, okay?
As the need for childcare grows greater and greater, governments are providing less and less help. Commonwealth spending on childcare has effectively halved in 6 years. Only 1 in 9 of the children needing care can get into day centres with qualified staff. The lucky parents can end up paying more for the privilege than if they'd sent their child to Geelong Grammar. The rest are forced to use backstreet baby minders. Furtive, illegal, inadequate. The human cost of the cuts in childcare may have to be paid a generation from now. That's Who Cares for Me? Next on Four Corners.
That's a tiger.
Watch. Hello. If there's one thing the Egyptians were good at, it was building. And the pharaoh Ramesses was the best builder of them all. Egypt is covered with his monuments, and today we're going to take a closer look at them. Behind me here is perhaps the most remarkable one of all, Abu Simbel. They're all statues of Ramesses, and they're each over 20 meters high. That's 4 times as high as a double-decker bus. But that's not all. Can you see down at the bottom? There's a door. Let's go and explore. Doesn't look such a small door now, does it? Look. And once you go through the door, you find yourself inside a huge temple. Inside, there are more giant statues of Ramesses. And on the walls, there are pictures of some of his victories. Here he is riding into battle on his chariot. And there's his favourite animal, a tame lion, running along beside him. And here he is raising his club and grabbing a bunch of them by the hair to finish them off. All this was to show the people what a mighty pharaoh Ramesses was. And you might think from this that the temple was built in his honour, but it wasn't. Strictly speaking, it was built in honour of the sun god, Ra. That's his statue, up there, between the big statues of Ramesses. And at the back of the temple, there are more statues to the sun god. The temple faces towards the east and the rising sun, and is positioned in such a way that twice a year, the rays of the rising sun shine through the door and light up the statues at the back. And here's another of Ramesses' monuments. It's a huge stone pillar known as an obelisk. And like the temple at Abu Simbel, the obelisk was put up partly in honour of the sun god and partly in honour of this man. Who is it? Ramesses. The sides of the obelisk are covered in that strange writing we told you about in the last programme, hieroglyphs. They look as though they were carved yesterday, don't they? But they're thousands of years old, and most of the writing is telling everyone what a wonderful person Ramesses is.
We've made our own obelisk out of old boxes. We've taped them together and we've placed a pyramid shape on the top, just like the ones in Egypt.
And we've carved the sides in hieroglyphs. This is my name. And this is Raven's. And this, the name of the series, Watch. You could make an obelisk like this. I think there'd be just enough room for all your names.
Our obelisk is nice and light. We can move it about because it's made of old boxes, you see. But real obelisks were made out of a single piece of stone, and they were very, very heavy. Which do you think was heavier, an obelisk or a London bus? Well, an obelisk was. In fact, some obelisks were heavier than 100 buses put together. And the amazing thing is that the Egyptians would sometimes move the obelisks hundreds of miles from the quarries where they'd dug the stone out to the place where they put the obelisk up. For much of the journey, they could put it on a boat and tow it up the Nile. That was quite easy. But what about the bits when they had to move it overland? Remember, they didn't have any cranes or lorries to help them. All they had was their muscles, some rope, and some things called rollers. Now, here's how the rollers work. If I try and push this brick along with my little finger, oh, it's really quite hard work. I can't really move it at all. But if I put the brick on these cardboard rollers, I just give it a push, and look, away it goes. And that's really just all the Egyptians would do with their obelisks. They'd drag them along on a track of rollers that had been greased with animal fat. As long as you have enough people working for you, you can move very heavy weights this way. And the Egyptians were never short of labourers. The Egyptians don't make obelisks anymore, but some of their building methods have hardly changed at all. These men, for example, live in modern Egypt and are making bricks. The These men are also making bricks 4,000 years ago. As Louise found out, the same methods are still used today, and they still work very well.
Most of the buildings we've been looking at have been made of stone. But when Ramesses wanted to build a new city, he would have used these sort of bricks. They're mud bricks. Now, to make mud bricks is very easy in Egypt. You take the black earth from the banks of the River Nile, and then you make it into mud by adding water and straw. Let's go and see how they do it. The earth is taken away to a shed and dumped into a trough. Water is sprinkled on to turn it into mud. And then a man throws on some chopped straw. The straw helps to bind the bricks together and makes them stronger. When the mud has been mixed, it is piled onto carts and hauled away by donkeys to the place where they will turn it into bricks. Now comes the final stage. The mud is lifted off the cart and placed in wooden moulds, which are themselves shaped like bricks. Then the moulds are turned upside down and out come the bricks, each one with the maker's stamp on it. Last of all, they are left to dry, and after a day in the sun, the bricks are ready for use.
You could make some mud bricks for your classroom museum and build yourself a little wall. As you see, it's very simple. First, you just need some earth and add water and mix it into mud. Now, if you want to do the job properly, you must mix in some chopped up straw or grass as well. Then we have to put it into a mould. Now, I've used an empty tea packet here, and I've put some tape round the edges to strengthen it. There we are. Now, if you want to make a good job of it, you should stamp it to show who the brick belongs to. Now, these bricks belong to me, so I'm going to stamp them with the Egyptian hieroglyph for R. That's the first letter of my name. Let's see what it looks like on paper first, so you can see clearly. Here we are. Now you stamp the bricks while they're still damp. That's it. And when they're dry, they come out looking like this. There, you see that? Now, if you go to the British Museum, you can see a mud brick there that was made in the time of Ramesses. You can just see Ramesses' stamp on the top there, see? And if you look very closely, look, there's bits of straw sticking out the edges there.
And talking of Ramesses, let's get back to the story, shall we? Well, the years had gone by, and Moses had grown from a boy into a strong young man. He still lived at the palace with the Egyptians, but deep in his heart and deep in his bones, he knew that he didn't belong to them. Who he was and where he came from, he had no idea. But he knew that the Egyptians were not his people. One day, he saw an Israelite slave gang toiling away in the quarries. He'd often seen this happening, of course, but this time it was somehow different. As the Israelites sweated away, they sang a sad song about their troubles. And as Moses watched and listened, the truth suddenly dawned on him. He knew by their faces and their movements and their voices that these were his own people. This was what he was. He was an Israelite. One of the Israelites was working on his own, and as he watched, Moses saw the slave master strike him to the ground. As the Israelite lay there helpless, the slave master continued to beat him savagely. Moses was filled with blind rage. Without thinking, he rushed in to defend the Israelite. But Moses was too full of anger, and he fought too hard. When the fight was over, the Egyptian lay dead in the sand. Moses was shocked at what he had done, and he looked around to see if anyone had seen. It seemed that no one had noticed, so Moses hastily buried the Egyptian in the sand and went away. but someone had seen. Next day, Moses saw two Israelites